Chapter 16, Part 2 of Nicholas, a Manhattan Christmas Story by Carroll Moore. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Celebrating Washington's Birthday, Part 2. Van Cortlandt's.
Which way is Van Cortlandt's?
Asked Jimmy.
I see it,
Cried Nicholas.
Van Cortlandt's is the old gray house with white shutters that stands out there in the big field. Come along, Jimmy. I'll race you. 1, 2, 3, go.
Take the low path, up through the garden.
Captain Leclerc called after them. The snow was still clinging to the little Christmas trees in the Dutch garden, and it lay so thick and white upon the strange little statue on top of the fountain that neither Nicholas nor Jimmy could quite make out what was hidden there.
It's some kind of an animal,
said Jimmy, and then Nicholas caught the outline of a broad, flat tail.
It's a beaver,
he cried.
I've never seen a statue of a beaver before. Have you, Jimmy?
Jimmy shook his head. He was scooping up the soft snow from the edge of the fountain, and his blue eyes danced with fun as he began to shape a strange little snowman in a sugarloaf hat.
Bring me some sticks for his pipe and cane, Nicholas,
he said.
And we'll leave Mr. Van Cortlandt here for Anne Carraway and the captain.
Nicholas was just putting the cane into the Dutch snowman's hand when he heard voices at the bottom of the garden, and taking to his heels, he ran up 2 flights of red brick steps and across a broad snowy lawn to the front door of the old stone house. 3 seconds later, Jimmy stood on the porch beside him, and together they tried the door. It was locked.
The captain must have a key,
said Jimmy.
He had one for the city hall.
But when the captain came, he said that he carried no key to Van Cortlandt's. He had forgotten the doors were locked at sundown.
Suppose you try that big knocker on the side door, Nicholas,
he suggested.
You might be able to raise somebody.
So Nicholas ran round the house to the side door. It was a Dutch door with a high half and a low half, and it was painted yellow and white. The great brass knocker was so high up that Captain Leclerc had to boost Nicholas to reach it. 3 times he lifted the knocker and knocked with a heavy knock. At the 3rd knock, the upper half of the door swung open, and there stood a lovely young lady with laughing brown eyes, rosy cheeks, and the jolliest smile you ever saw. She was dressed in a yellow satin brocade with panniers of bright flowered silk, and her dark brown curls were caught up at the back under a big, shining tortoise-shell comb.
"Oh, Nicholas, Nicholas!"
she cried.
"You've really come at last. I knew you would."
And reaching down over the Dutch door, she took both his hands in hers.
"Hold fast and jump,"
she called. Up sprang Nicholas and stood upon the door.
Please unlock the door and let us all in,
he begged with a beaming smile.
These are my friends, Jimmy Blair, Anne Carraway, and the captain.
"I'm delighted to see you all,"
said the charming hostess of Van Cortlandt's, and the lower half of the door swung open at the firm touch of her hand.
"Come right down to the old kitchen and have a cup of Dutch chocolate with Nicholas."
Why, Molly Gardner,
exclaimed the captain as their eyes met.
What brings you here?
"I always celebrate Washington's birthday somewhere,"
she said.
"Last year I was at Oyster Bay, and today I've motored the length of Long Island on the chance of meeting Nicholas here. I missed him at Christmas, you see."
And catching Nicholas by the hand, Molly Gardner danced gaily through the hall and down the cellar stairs to the old Dutch kitchen.
It's the jolliest kitchen I've ever seen,
he cried as he danced about the big room with Molly Gardner. And when they were out of breath, Molly Gardner threw a stick of driftwood and a handful of pine cones on the fire, took the singing tea kettle from the crane, and set it on the hearth. And turning to Anne Carraway, she pushed a little footstool under her feet, and to Jimmy she handed the bellows to blow.
And you, what makes you here, you strange young man?
She asked the captain as he placed her chair at the tea table.
Still looking for the crock o' gold, I'll be bound.
And Molly Gardiner laughed so merrily that all the others laughed with her.
The last time I saw Captain Leclaire, Nicholas, he was digging away for Captain Kidd's treasure on Gardiner's Island.
Did you find any, Captain Leclaire?
Asked Nicholas eagerly.
Joe Starr says Gardiner's Island is the place to look.
I found some of the finest clams on Long Island Sound that day, Nicholas,
said the captain gravely, and his eyes twinkled as he looked over at Molly Gardiner, pouring rich, creamy chocolate from an old blue pitcher.
I'd like to go to Gardiner's Island someday,
said Nicholas.
I'll take you there in my sailboat,
said Molly Gardiner.
And before we go, I'll tell you some wonderful stories about Gardiner's Island. My great-great-great-grandmother lived there. Her husband was a soldier under General Washington. The cakes you're eating are just like the ones she used to give the friends who came to see her. She baked hers in a Dutch oven, but I didn't dare risk mine in this one.
And Molly Gardiner laughed again as she touched the Dutch oven on the hearth with the toe of her black satin slipper. Nicholas nodded.
They're very good cakes,
he said.
Have another, Jimmy?
But Jimmy, having finished his chocolate, was exploring the treasures of the Dutch kitchen. From one of the rough beams overhead hung an old musket and powder horn, and behind some big copper and brass kettles he had discovered a fascinating churn and a cheese press. And now from a far corner came the rat-tat-tat of a shoemaker's hammer, and Nicholas, running across the room to see what was happening, found Jimmy with one shoe off, seated at a little shoemaker's bench, hammering away for dear life.
The shoemakers used to go round to people's houses, Nicholas. Everybody had a little bench like this one. I've never seen one before. It's very handy. My shoe wanted fixing.
Molly Gardiner had slipped out of the kitchen while the boys were at the shoemaker's bench, and she now called softly down the cellar stairs,
Nicholas, Jimmy, come quick.
Upstairs ran the two boys, but when they reached the top, Molly Gardiner was nowhere to be seen, and the shadows were thick and black around them. They could hear the faint ticking of an old-fashioned clock, but they couldn't see which way to turn. And then from above they heard again,
Nicholas, Jimmy, come quick.
There was a gleam of light at the head of the second stairway, which disappeared as they rushed up through the darkness. But when they reached the top stair, they could see firelight dancing along the wall, and at a half-open door Molly Gardiner was waiting for them.
This is your very own room, Nicholas,
she said as she lighted them in with a tall yellow candle.
It was built for a Dutch boy, you see. I just ran up to light the fire and the candles for you and Jimmy. I'll go back now to Anne Carraway and the captain. Have a good time. Have a good time, dear Nicholas.
And gathering up her yellow skirts, Molly Gardiner ran lightly down the steep back stairs. Nicholas and Jimmy had a wonderful time playing in the Dutch room.
I've never seen a bed like that one, Nicholas,
said Jimmy.
It looks like a cabinet with one side off.
It's an old-fashioned Dutch bed,
replied Nicholas.
You run up a flight of steps and jump in. I'll show you.
And Nicholas ran up the step-ladder which stood beside the strange bed and jumped in head first. He was out again in no time, for he had spied a fine old ship in a far corner. Leaping aboard, he shouted,
It's the Hood of Row, the old Hood of Row, Jimmy. I'm sailing away from Amsterdam, from Amsterdam, from Amsterdam. I'm sailing away from Amsterdam on St. Nicholas morning early.
And while Nicholas sailed away on the Goede Vrouw, Jimmy discovered Jacob Hop's funny old sled and was off for a slide. It was very quiet in the Dutch room when Molly Gardiner stole up the back stairs again with Anne Carraway and the captain, Both boys were lying in front of the blue-tiled fireplace, fast asleep.
It seems a pity to wake them up,
said Molly Gardiner.
but I've promised to be in Washington Square tonight, and it's nearly time to start. Won't you all come with me? I'm going to see some very dear friends who live in one of the old houses on the north side. They have the most enchanting attic you've ever seen.
I'd love to go, and so would Nicholas,
said Anne Carraway.
He's been wanting to see the inside of one of those old houses ever since Christmas Eve, but...
She sighed.
I'm not dressed for a party.
No more am I,
said Captain Leclerc.
It's the kind of a party where you dress after you get there and do whatever you please. Now will you come with me?
Pleaded Molly Gardiner.
Yes, I'll come with you.
Cried Nicholas, jumping up with a start.
I dreamed I was over in Holland, but I'm glad I'm not. Wake up, Jimmy, wake up. We're off for Washington Square with Molly Gardiner.
Did you find the old treasure chest, Nicholas?
Whispered Molly Gardiner.
Yes, we found it.
Chuckled Nicholas.
It's a pirate's chest, and it's locked. Jimmy says Captain Kidd must have the key.
We'll look for it when we go to Gardiner's Island,
said Molly Gardiner with a merry laugh.
You must say good night to the Dutch room now, for the blue motor waits below.
We'd like to see the room where the general slept before we go,
said the captain.
Then come this way,
cried Molly Gardiner.
We'll each take one of your candles, Nicholas, to light the general's room. Blow out the others, please.
And taking a tall yellow candle from the chimney-piece, she stepped out into the dark hall.
The general slept in the west room,
the captain told Anne Carraway as they picked up their candles to follow Molly Gardiner. Nicholas and Jimmy blew out all the yellow candles, one by one, until only 2 were left, and then they closed the door of the Dutch room and ran out into the front hall. The west room was large and square and airy and peaceful. On the table beside the old four-poster lay a big flintlock pistol with silver mountings.
Did General Washington leave his pistol?
Demanded Jimmy.
No,
the captain replied.
The general didn't carry this pistol, but he had one just like it, and he loaded and fired his in the same way. No wonder the general liked to sleep here,
mused the captain.
He might be riding down from West Point tonight, under the same old moon.
The captain raised one of the wide front windows, and Nicholas and Jimmy ran over to look out.
Don't you love the old ball dresses hanging up in the closets?
Molly Gardiner was saying to Anne Carraway.
Here's a pink one made like mine.
And then she added,
There's a fascinating playroom with a doll's house and a toy soldier on horseback in the attic above the general's room. But you must come back and see it all by daylight.
I like moonlight and candlelight better,
Anne Carraway replied as they descended the broad front stairs.
I'm in love with the old house. I had no idea it was so alive. It seems as if the Van Cortlandts had just stepped out across the fields to watch for the general, that they might come back any minute to light the fires and the candles and lay the table for his supper. Everything is ready.
That's the way it always seems here,
said Molly Gardiner.
Even by day, and that's why I love this house best of all the old houses I visit.
The door of the west room closed softly, and down the broad stairs came the captain with Nicholas and Jimmy.
Are you ready to go now?
Asked Molly Gardiner with a quick look at the old clock.
Quite ready,
the captain replied.
I'll bring the car round.
The blue motor. The blue motor rolled out of Van Cortlandt Park in the moonlight and turned down Broadway. Nicholas and Jimmy sat up in front with the captain, who knew and loved every twist and turn of the long, winding road to the heart of Manhattan. Higher and higher, first above the Harlem, then above the Hudson River, climbed the blue motor, and when it reached the top, It cut across the island and ran out upon a wooded road where great rocks loomed strange and lonely at night. Far, far below, spread out like a panorama, Nicholas could see hundreds of moving lights on elevated trains and bridges.
Is that Hellgate Bridge? Where are we, Captain Leclerc?
He asked.
On Harlem Heights,
Replied the captain.
Look sharp, Jimmy.
With a loud honk honk, the blue motor swung round a curve, and high above the dark rocks there stood an old white house with bare, wind-warped trees about it.
It's the house where Washington lived,
Cried Jimmy.
Oh, Captain Leclerc, how lovely it is in the moonlight,
Said Molly Gardiner.
I've never seen it from this side before.
I always come this way,
The captain replied.
and I seldom go inside. I just like to walk around up here and look off.
The blue motor climbed slowly up the steep hill in front of a fine old Georgian house, and turning the corner of Juvenile Terrace, stopped at the gates of the driveway.
Did General Washington stay here very long?
Asked Nicholas.
Just over a month.
Replied the captain.
But a great deal happened in that month, Nicholas. The general won his first victory in an open-field encounter at Harlem Heights. He wouldn't be likely to forget that as long as he lived. Then one night, just before midnight, a red light appeared in the sky, and all night long they watched New York burning from up here. The general had ridden out across King's Bridge with General Putnam to inspect the camps that day. Across the Hudson was a bridge of boats, and just at sunset, Captain Nathan Hale was brought to the Beekman house.
No wonder the general came up here often to look off, and no wonder he kept on coming after he was president. It was Washington's high tower, Jimmy. From it he could look across Jersey Flats and the high hills of Staten Island, along the Hudson Valley, and up and down Long Island. Whenever the general wanted to know what was going on anywhere, he would just climb up to the top of the house with his spyglasses and look off.
Drive down past the Grange, Captain Leclerc,
Said Anne Carraway as the blue motor turned into the St. Nicholas Road, and while the blue motor sped on over Harlem Heights, the captain told Nicholas and Jimmy how the general had first met the little lion up there.
The little lion wasn't making a speech that day,
Said the captain.
He was posting his guns, and the general stopped to watch him. It didn't take the general long to make up his mind that he needed that lightning-quick young captain of artillery, first as an aide-de-camp, then as a friend. The general had a genius for friendship, Nicholas.
Lafayette was his friend too.
Said Jimmy.
Did Lafayette know the little lion, Captain Leclerc?
Yes, Jimmy, Lafayette knew him well, for they lived together in my family, as the general called his staff, and he treated them like sons.
The stars are shining bright above the Grange tonight,
Said Molly Gardiner when the blue motor stopped at the corner of 145th Street.
Look, Nicholas,
Cried Jimmy.
there goes the shooting star. Do you think it fell into the Hudson River, Captain Leclerc?
I wonder.
Said the captain.
Tell us about the Grange, Anne Carraway.
Said Nicholas.
The Grange was the little lion's dream for his children, Nicholas, the dream of a home of his own in a place that he loved. He knew all of the secrets of the woodcocks and partridges in Harlem woods before he ever met the general, and he used to fish for striped bass in the Hudson River. And so, one day, long after the war was over, after the Federal ship was launched, after his greatest dreams for his country had come true, Alexander Hamilton bought a farm up here and gave it the name of the home of his ancestors in Scotland.
My father was telling me about Hamilton's Grange.
Said Jimmy.
I wish it was here yet. You could look clear to the river, Nicholas.
Did the house stand on this corner?
Asked Molly Gardiner.
No,
Said the captain.
it was 3 blocks down the road. St. Nicholas had not yet named this road, and Hamilton used to ride home on horseback by the Kingsbridge Road and take a sloop at his own landing to sail up the Hudson to Albany.
It must have been lots of fun at the Grange,
said Nicholas.
It was,
And Carraway replied.
The little lion knew how to play with his 8 children, and he gave them all the fun he had missed in his own boyhood. He didn't build an imposing house. It was a low white one with balconies and a roof where they sat on summer evenings and watched the boats on the river. General Hamilton planted the gardens and shade trees himself, and just before Christmas, he wrote to General Pinckney in South Carolina and asked him to send him some melon seeds and 2 or 3 parakeets. My daughter, Angelica, he said, is very fond of birds.
Did General Pinckney send the birds, Anne Carraway?
Asked Nicholas eagerly.
Not right away,
replied Anne Carraway.
He answered the letter in March and said he hadn't been able to find any parakeets yet, and so he was sending watermelon and muskmelon seeds and seeds of scarlet sage and coral shrub by the Charleston packet. He promised to send the parakeets later if he could find any.
Did they have pigeons at the Grange?
Asked Nicholas.
Lots of them,
said Captain Leclerc.
The little lion enlarged the quarters for the pigeons and wrote a special letter to make sure his plan was carried out.
He thought of everything to make his home beautiful and homelike, outside and inside,
said Anne Carraway.
And there was magic in his touch,
said Molly Gardiner.
For it's left beauty here.
The blue motor crossed the island below the Grange and ran swiftly down Riverside Drive. In the Hudson River stood a long line of lighted ships.
The fleet is in! The fleet is in!
Cried Jimmy.
These are Washington's ships, Nicholas. They've come for his birthday.
Is the Arizona there?
Asked Nicholas. In Washington Square. Down Fifth Avenue, on flashes of orange light, rolled the blue motor. Through Washington Arch and round the square it swept before it stopped at Number North.
This is the very house I wished I could look inside on Christmas Eve, Molly Gardiner,
said Nicholas as they ran up the steps together.
Wishes often come true in Washington Square, Nicholas,
Molly Gardiner replied, and rang the bell 5 times. A tall, fine-looking young man in the uniform of an Italian officer opened the door.
I'd know your ring across the world, Molly Gardiner,
he said.
Short and long, and very long. It's a true ring.
Molly Gardiner laughed merrily.
Oh, Renato,
she cried.
What fun to find you here. I thought you were still in South America. When did you come home?
I've been in the house just long enough to get into my old uniform,
replied Lieutenant Vero.
Mother wanted me to surprise her guests tonight. She says the French officers may have had the luck to be the first to celebrate Washington's birthday, but the Italians are going to be the last to keep it. The others are all in the attic dressing. Shall I show your friends up?
Please do, Renato, while I run to find your mother. So, this is why she told me to wear the yellow satin brocade tonight,
said Molly Gardiner to herself as she vanished through a doorway to the left of the wide entrance hall. It was a beautiful old house, and long before Nicholas and Jimmy reached the top of the winding stairway leading to the attic, they were longing to slide down the polished banisters. Renato Vero must have guessed what they were thinking, for he whispered,
Watch your chance later on. I'll give the high sign when the coast is clear.
It's going to be lots of fun,
said Nicholas to Jimmy.
This is the jolliest attic I've ever seen, Captain Leclerc.
But Captain Leclerc had caught sight of a blue and buff uniform hanging from one of the beams, and was off like a shot to claim it, while Anne Carraway was diving deep into the mysteries of an enormous trunk marked Miss Flora McFlimsy, Madison Square, from Paris.
I always believed I'd find one of her trunks in New York,
she cried, holding up an apple-green silk with a very wide ruffled skirt and a tight little bodice with lace collar and undersleeves.
Throw me down a hoop and a bonnet, Lieutenant Farrow, and I'll be ready to trundle down Broadway in no time.
And gathering up her silks and crinoline, Anne Carroway disappeared behind the chintz curtains of one of the little dressing rooms. Poking about under the eaves of that enchanting attic, Jimmy discovered a small hairy trunk, which he dragged out under one of the jack-o'-lantern lights. Raising the lid, he drew from its wrappings the neatly folded kiltie of a little Scotch Highlander.
It's the very sauce for me,
he exclaimed delightedly.
I go and put it on right away.
Left alone in the big open attic, Nicholas wandered about, trying to find a suit as small as his own, but they were all much too big.
I shall have to go just as I am,
he said at last, and sat down to wait for Jimmy. And while he was sitting there, feeling a little lonely and out of things, Veruca came bounding up the attic stairs, and planting a paw on each of Nicholas's shoulders, he took a good look at the rosy, friendly face of the little Dutch boy, and began playing with his woolen muffler.
Why, you lovely black cat,
whispered Nicholas.
You look just like a dog. Do you hear me? Just like a dog. I'd lots rather play with you than dress up tonight. Let's have a game of hide and seek.
Veruca's big yellow eyes sent out snapping green lights as he padded off over the attic floor and disappeared behind Flora McPhercy's trunk. And a lively game of hide and seek it was, for Veruca knew all the secret hiding places of that old attic, and Nicholas chased him from one to another without stopping. Chuckling and panting for breath, Nicholas finally pulled Renato's old football out of a box of toys and threw it across the attic floor. Veruca caught the ball, and while he stood with one paw upon it, along came Nicholas and gave it a strong push. Over the floor and down the long stairway bounced the ball, with Veruca tearing after it.
I'm down first,
cried Nicholas, waving a hand to Veruca from the banister rail.
Could we go in there?
he asked, nodding toward the dining-room door. It was open a crack, and Nicholas caught tantalizing glimpses of a festive table set for a supper party. Veruca twisted his whiskers, and then very cautiously pushed open the door. The room was dimly lighted by tall white candles and a fire of glowing red coals. Veruca went straight to the old sideboard, and one after another he opened the doors of its many cupboards. Then, with eyes flashing their greenest lights, he jumped up on top to sniff the delicious smell of tempting glasses of zabaione set out upon crystal trays. From the sideboard he made a flying leap to the table for a good look at the big birthday cake with its wreath of red rosebuds and tender green leaves. A door opened, and in came Veruca's beautiful mistress with a silver dish of big shiny brown chestnuts in her hand.
"What are you doing on the supper table, Veruca?"
she asked sternly.
"Surely you will not eat again the little green leaves and the rosebuds Renato has brought for the birthday?"
she pleaded in tones so soft and sad that Veruca jumped down from the table and hid himself behind Nicholas.
"You promised never to eat my flowers more,"
his mistress continued.
"You must keep your promises, Veruca mio."
Please don't punish him,
said Nicholas, smiling up at Veruca's mistress.
Veruca's been very kind to me. I was lonesome, and he came to play with me. I asked him to bring me in here. He was just looking around and smelling a little. He wasn't eating anything. I like Veruca very much.
Veruca's mistress set the dish of castagna on the table, and giving one hand to Nicholas and the other to Veruca, she drew them gently down to a low seat beside the fire.
"Molly Gardner told me you were here, Nicholas,"
she said.
"I am so happy that you wanted to come, and that you are already good friends with Veruca. Veruca always knows his own, his ball, his bone, and the one he loves best. You will see how clever he is. He understands everything I say to him. Fetch the magic brush, Veruca."
Off ran Veruca, but he was soon back again with the soft brush, and his eyes glowed like two yellow lamps as his mistress brushed and brushed and brushed his silky black fur.
How old is Veruca?
Asked Nicholas.
15 years in November.
His mistress replied.
Veruca is the grandson of a distinguished Italian cat. He came to Washington Square in a basket when he was 3 months old. Renato was 12 years old, and he taught Veruca to play many games. Renato taught him how to play baseball, using his paw for a bat, and Veruca never missed a ball. Even yet is Veruca full of mischief.
I know he is,
said Nicholas.
He's been playing ball with me in the attic. Come along, Veruca, let's go and play some more.
Take Nicholas to the library, Veruca, and introduce him to your master. Only if you are very good, remember, will I give you some of the partridge now roasting in the kitchen.
Back to his mistress ran Veruca and stood up on his hind legs.
Just the way Hunky does when he's asking Ben Starr for something,
said Nicholas to himself.
Come along, Veruca, it isn't supper time yet.
Veruca's master was sitting upstairs in his cozy library reading so intently that he didn't even hear the clattering of Nicholas's wooden shoes as he crossed the polished floor. Not until Veruca leaped upon his shoulder and whispered something in his ear did he look up. Then he put down his book and called to Nicholas with a merry twinkle in his kind eyes.
Welcome to Washington Square, Nicholas Knickerbocker. Veruca has told me all about you. He asked me to stop reading this stupid book and show you his book.
The big room was lined with books from floor to ceiling. There were books with pictures and books without any pictures at all, large books and small books, thick, fat books, long, thin books, books in beautiful red, blue, and green leather covers, and books in covers of gay flowered paper. It was easy to see that, to Veruca's master, his books were his friends, and while Nicholas was looking about, Veruca was sniffing impatiently at a wide, flat book on one of the lower shelves. His master reached down and picked up the book. Then, placing chairs for Nicholas and Veruca and himself at a table, he sat down between them with Veruca's favorite book. It was full of wonderful pictures of cats from all over the world. And while Veruca sat there, his hind legs in the chair, his forepaws resting on the table, watching his master turn the pages of the cat book, Renato appeared with Captain Leclerc.
There's a picture for you,
he exclaimed.
Veruca always sat like that while my sister and I studied our lessons on winter evenings. He wanted to do whatever we were doing. Do you remember, Father, how Veruca would stand up on my shoulder and keep on looking at everything while I walked all over the house with him? He's more like a human being than a cat, isn't he?
Renato's father smiled. He was very wise, and he seemed to know more about cats than anyone Nicholas had ever met before.
Now I will show you Renato's favorite book, Nicholas,
he said, taking down a very big book with a jolly picture on the cover. Nicholas immediately recognized his old friend Pinocchio.
I've read it in Dutch and English,
he cried.
I love Pinocchio, but I've never seen all these nice pictures before. An Italian artist drew them, Captain Leclerc.
The captain and Renato had already seated themselves at the table, and Renato was telling the story by the pictures, just as he used to tell it when he was a little boy, when a lovely, dark-eyed girl in a scarlet dress stole into the room and perched on the arm of Nicholas's chair.
I'm Fiora, Renato's little sister,
she whispered softly.
I make pictures myself sometimes, Nicholas. Veruca will bring you up to my studio after supper. It's on the roof.
There's a telescope up there. We'll all go up and take a look at the moon,
said Renato, closing his book.
Baruka loves to look at the moon through a telescope. Don't you, Baruka?
Baruka looked gravely at Renato, withdrew his paws from the table, arched his beautiful shining back, and walking slowly across the room, jumped up on the window-sill for a mighty stretch.
"Come quickly, Renato,"
called a gay voice from the doorway.
"Our mother is waiting below to welcome her guests, and Molly Gardner says you're to lead the march down the attic stairs. Everybody's dressed. They're dancing up there."
"I'll sing Italia, Italia!"
cried Gemma Romano, and her eyes shone like stars as she kissed her hand to Nicholas.
Mwah!
Gemma Romano was Fiora's cousin. She was older than Fiora, and she wore a soft, clinging white dress with a gorgeous sash, and her silky black hair was bound close about her head with golden bands. She fingered the strings of her mandolin and began to play.
"Wait, Gemma,"
said Fiora gently, raising the window where Baruka still stood looking out.
"Wait until our guests are all here. Baruka knows that some of them will come this way."
Baruka, do you see anybody coming yet?"
called Nicholas, and ran over to the window to look out. It was nearly as bright as day in Washington Square, for the moon was sailing high above the arch where the tall figures of the General and President stand.
Here they come,
shouted Nicholas.
"They're singing the Broadway song."
Through the wide open window floated first the music, then the words of an old song.
"The sweetest thing in life, and no one dare say nay, on a Saturday afternoon, is walking down Broadway."
Nearer and nearer came the singers, dancing to the music of their song, and Nicholas saw that the ladies were wearing wide spreading skirts and quaint old bonnets with bunches of roses inside, and the men were in high white collars, gay coats, and funny top hats.
Walking down Broadway, the festive gay Broadway, the OK playing on Saturdays, walking down Broadway.
Over and over they sang the words as they crossed the square and danced up through the arch.
"It's Mrs. Tiffany in her tall riding hat,"
said Fiora.
"Gertrude with her little bird, Millinette, Anna for Joe. All the players from Fashion are coming. We've asked them over from the Provincetown Theater for supper tonight."
"Bring everybody down from the attic, Renato,"
Molly Gardner called up the stairs.
"The town is at the ball tonight. The town is at the ball. Where is Anne Carraway? I want her to open the door."
There was a rustle of apple-green silk skirts on the attic stairs, and Miss Flora McLersey curtsied low to Molly Gardner as she swept through the wide hall to open the door to the players. Greeting Mrs. Tiffany with a kiss, she presented her to her hostess, who at once invited Mrs. Tiffany to lead the ball with Renato.
"But first," she said, "you must all have supper."
And she led the way to a dining room now blazing with birthday candles. At the big round table with the birthday cake in the middle sat Nicholas with Baruka and Jimmy in his kiltie.
"Nicholas Knickerbocker is our host tonight,"
said Renato's father.
"Take seats at his table."
"Oh no, I'm not, sir,"
cried Nicholas.
"I'm just company. This is Baruka's party for George Washington. He wants you all to sit down."
End of chapter 16, part 2.